for study or for occupation job, they go to cities or area. But in that age, they may have to live with other people or in institutions, or they have to, for saving money, they have to live with other persons. But in old age, they are left behind because of out migration. So maybe that may explain. And of course, life expectancy is the main reason for more old women than men. So probably these two factors may answer the query.
Okay, thank you for your brief but very precise answer. Some other question come for Dr. Kauranga. There are some questions to you. So the first question is from Dr. Marpaleni. Let me just read the question. Dear Dr. Kaur, it is so nice to see you at this conference. Your paper is very interesting. I'm very interested in your recommendation regarding this, the necessity to create a database about the number and characteristic of the person work as volunteer, and maybe also their contribution to the country. In regard to that, do you have any suggestion about what could we do as an initial step to produce such statistic in Indonesia? Please, the time is yours.
Can I answer that now?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Lenny, for that question, and thank you for appreciating the presentation. I think as a first step, what they do in Australia is at every census, people are asked about what occupations they follow or what they do. I think volunteering work is one of the categories mentioned there. So that is one basis of collecting data on volunteers. But also there are periodic labor force surveys or other socioeconomic surveys in which the question on volunteering can be inserted and asked, and that should be the initial step, because I believe every country, every age group has people volunteering to do some work without pay or profit. So that will be the first step to start such thing in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kauranga. The other question coming from Aas Tejasmara from BKKP in Indonesia. Dr. Kaur, the female of all three generations observed are more likely to volunteer than their male counterpart. Would you suggest that this is expected because women are perceived to possess more nurturing and compassion capacity than men do? The second question, why do you think Gen X are more likely to volunteer than baby boomer when younger generation tend to be perceived as less responsible or not care about others as much? Please, the time is yours.
Thank you, Aas. Thank you for the first question. I think that is a leading question, and I can agree with you. The females are more nurturing than males, but also I think in general, the female population probably has got more time on their hands. And also because you can see in, the most of the organized voluntary work is done in sport and recreational activities, where you can see mothers taking their children to sport activities and things like that. So that might explain a part of the excess of females in voluntary work in proportionate terms. I think the second question is Gen X. I don't know why they are actually more likely to volunteer, but probably, as I mentioned in the first or second slide, that voluntary work is regarded as being important in order to get a more paid job later on, or to expand one's network. And their better performance in voluntary work compared to the Generation Y or baby boomers, actually, of course, they are past their prime age mostly. And as you have seen, that they have recorded a negative rate of growth in the population. but compared to Generation Y, again, there are many other social perceptions about Generation Y. They are less likely to, they're more centralistic, they're more, what should I say, less altruistic in their pursuit. So, but I don't have any other clear answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kauranga, for your thoughtful answer. And yet, I think we still have some time for this discussion. So if you don't mind, I would like to have a question for Masataka. I think I found your presentation is very interesting. It is very inspiring for me, but I still not quite sure if I take a look at your finding, Masataka. Can you probably explain the possibility? I mean, not the possibility, but if you go back to your main finding, is there any possibility that this kind of issue may also happen in some other country, in the developing country, like probably in Korea or some other developing country?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, I could expect similar result for the other countries, particularly in East Asia, because the traditional norm of intergenerational support or multi-generational co-residence is quite strong in these countries, and demographic behaviors, including migration, is linked to these traditional family norms or obligations. So, as I said, yes, my answer is yes. I could expect quite similar result for the other countries, and situation is a bit different from the European or North American context, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Masataka, for your thoughtful answer. I take a look at back in the chat box, and there is a question coming from Dr. Kauranga. It is very good question, I guess. It is directed to Masataka again. Let me just read this question. Last question for Dr. Nakagawa. What is the proportion of retirees among return volunteer?
I think this question is to Professor Dasparla, not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the question is about volunteers, so it's not to me. I think it's
no.
It's the professor.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. I should say it's among return migrants, not volunteers.
Sorry.
No,
I do not have any information on volunteers involvement of volunteering activities, so I do not have specific answers to your question. Sorry, but
what I mentioned is return migrants.
Return migrants, the proportion of return migrants. Return migrants. It's not so common in Japan. I mean, as I said, return migration is most likely to happen in the age 20 to 30s. And the situation is a bit different from the Australian situations in Japan, because Australia return migration is more likely to happen. I mean, retirement migration is more likely to happen at the age of retirement, 60s or late 50s. But in Japan, retirement migration rate is quite low, so we not have the big volume of this kind of population for return migrants. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you again for Dr. Masataka. You just answered very briefly, but your answer is quite thoughtful. Well, I take a look at back again at the chat box, and I do not see any other question. So if some other participant would like to have question, probably we still have some time for Q&A. But if not, no other question, perhaps I can give back the time and the stage to the moderator one.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malyanti, for moderating the session and also asking some of the interesting questions. Okay, I would like to ask each of you a few questions, and first to Dr. Preethi, and I think my question to Dr. Preethi also to some extent may relate it to the Dr. Masataka's presentations, because what do we see in the context of India, if you say that this one member family, so one couple family is primarily increasing only towards the end and towards the older ages when actually females becoming, and it is more among females, that implies that it is primarily a function of widowhood rather than anything else. So because of the age difference between the spouses, and there is more widowhood, and that can perhaps the result of this living alone. So it is not really like in the Western countries what we see. Perhaps that is also true in Japan. What is we see in the Asian culture, it is something dramatically different. You know, migration by perhaps is happening, but the migration is because of the necessity, but that doesn't really mean that they are living away from the family. They are very closely connected with the family, as well as they like to return to the family. So if that's the case, I was also thinking about your model. What is that we need to model? We cannot model the life expectancy. We should have modeled the differential life expectancy. That really matters there. Perhaps why the high females are in the one family or a one member family towards the older age is primarily because of the life expectancy differentials. Because otherwise it's very difficult to explain why there is an increasing life expectancy also shows a decline in the one member family. How do you explain it? I was thinking that the dynamics may be because of the differentials rather than not primarily through the improvement in the life expectancy. How do you respond to that? The Preethi, you can answer.
Yeah,
and then
thank you. Thank you very much for your suggestions.
Sure.
Yes, I agree with you that it is important to take into account the effect of life expectancy. Increasing life expectancy. Yes, that's really the important point. But at the same time, I also think it is important to consider the effect of low fertility. Impact of low fertility. As you said, it's true that one-person householding is quite becoming common in East Asian countries, but at the same time, we have been experiencing declining fertility rate. As a result, the number of siblings for each individual, particularly at the young cohort, is also declining. So what happens now is that the family obligations or family burden to support their children, their parents, is all to individual person is also increasing because as a result of declining low fertility. So my answer is that it is, yes, you are right. It is important to take into account the effect of life expectancy, but also important to accommodate the effect of low fertility. I hope you answered your question.
Thank you. And Dr. Preethi?
Yeah, so I do agree that gender differentials in life expectancy may explain it. But this was the initial analysis where we considered basic characteristics, TFR and life expectancy. We also, in different paper, we analyzed life expectancy at age 60. That again, we need to see whether life expectancy at birth or maybe at different ages can explain it. So that can be investigated further. Yeah.
Okay, I think I have one more question to both of you. If you really consider the emerging living arrangements or the patterns of household changes in this country, either in Japan or India, do you think that this is substantially different from what we experience in the Western countries? So are we going in an entirely different direction, or we are also sort of closer to the Western experience? Because that is where we are drawing experience now from. So what do you think? What is that these countries emerge? Because Japan is as good as sort of a Western countries in terms of demographic changes, but India may be a bit lagging. But where do you place our living arrangement changes and our household composition changes in terms of what really experienced in the other countries?
For India, sir, I feel that it is not as in developed nation. It will be different experience because we have different characteristics of population. Means they are not technologically advanced. If even old people are living alone, so they are not that advanced, so that they can't manage the things like developed nation elderly can manage. Social security also we have less in India. So I think we have, even if we have less proportion of living alone, we will have more, we may have more issues, and because they may not cope with that. However, we do have other living arrangement is also associated with other social support they may have from relatives, but not in other like cities, they may not get language barriers, cultural barriers. So those issues are in India, which may not be same as other countries like developed nation.
Okay, thank you. What about
To Japan.
Japan?
Yes, in terms of the demographic indicators such as life expectancy or fertility, Japan is already at the same level of demographic change with most of the Western North American countries. But as I said, with regard to the living arrangement, for example, the proportion of young people in the age of 20s to 30s living with their parents is over 40%. But on the other hand, in some of the Western societies, the same percentage is less than 10%. So I don't see in terms of the living arrangement, Japan is at the same, the context with other, developed countries. So and also I don't expect the situation to be changed drastically or continuously in Japan, along with the other, developed aging societies. Thank you.
Please unmute.
You are still muted, Dr. Jim.
Oh, sorry, sorry about that. Thank you for that answer. And let me just ask a question to Dr. Gauranga. Because that it has been very wonderful to listen about the volunteering part, which is commonly not measured. I think why it is not measured in many countries, because volunteering is in addition to the main duties, your jobs, which is often go unnoticed. That is why actually I'm not very sure, unless you have a time use survey or something, which is sometimes in countries, some countries like in South Asian countries, it has been attempted. We don't really get this information. That way, it's a really very useful information. I was wondering whether such information is available for any other countries, or you have seen whether such kind of data is coming from any other context. If you have any information on that, that will be quite useful for the participants in this seminar.
Thank you, Professor James. Yeah, I think some Western countries do, and also it is not just the working people, they're volunteering their part-time. I can see in Australia, most of people who have retired, like say at the age of 65, although there is no fixed retirement age in Australia now, but even people after retirement, they find a huge amount of time on their hands and they are willingly participating in voluntary work. As for myself, I can count myself as a volunteer because I retired quite a long time ago officially, but I'm still attached to the university and I provide my services almost for free, teaching and researching and supervising. So the culture of volunteering is very prevalent. In fact, personally, again, my wife, she also retired and she volunteers now. So if you go to any hospital or a big place, and there you can see guides telling you about where to go, to which ward to see what person. They're almost always done by the volunteers. Of course, they do get training for that. They have to get police clearance to do such job, but they are essentially volunteers. And I think some Western countries do collect data on volunteering. So it could be, as you mentioned, time use survey, or maybe starting with a census or a national socioeconomic survey. I can add a question to the NFHS also and start collecting some data. And because it is a huge amount of work people do, there are lots of NGOs in India where people volunteer to do some work. So, but we don't know to the true extent of what they do and how much they do and how we can translate their efforts into monetary terms. That will be a good start, I think, to start with.
Okay, thank you. I think that has been very informative. Because I was also intrigued by your data, particularly on the age aspect. Because
Yeah.
as the age goes up, the volunteering also goes up. That was, but you were primarily trying to attribute it to the baby boom generations or the other aspects. I was wondering whether it is a very pure age effect, because retirement life also has high volunteering, rather than anything to do with the baby boom generations or any other things. It's purely retirement and the important aspects of your life rather than anything else. So we will see even the upcoming generations also the same level of volunteering may continue in the future, although currently the younger generation has less volunteering. Yeah, please.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But except I mentioned in the context of Australia that here all the like the country fire service or even the metropolitan fire service firemen, essentially it is men who do the fire work. I mean, fire extinguishing work. They are essentially volunteers, although they do get training, and they are not retirees. Actually, they are not old people. They are quite able-bodied young people. So that's why one of the estimates I showed us, the total worth of volunteering in Australia is more than $200 billion worth. And that counted the amount of lives saved by those people, in fire, in flood and things. So those lives saved, that's been translated into their monetary value. So it is not just after retirement. People do find, and I think, and I have seen it in India and personally, people after retirement just go completely stop their work, and then health suffers, their mental health suffers, and they really just extinguish themselves. So volunteering work will be a thing to pursue your health and happiness.
Absolutely. I think that's really, it's a good way to motivate people to come for volunteering, which is good for society as well as good for our own mental health. I think that's a good message.
Yeah.
I think that is from my side. I don't know, Mulyanti, there is any other questions?
No, thanks, Dr. James.
Yeah. There are no other questions. It has been a wonderful session. Actually, as I started my talk in the beginning of this session, because with the demographic changes, with so many changes happening in the society, I think what is today presented in the family or the household demography it has greater relevance, and all of us are able to appreciate whether it is volunteering, whether it is one member family, whether it is looking after the parents, even despite the migration and all, you are forced to have migration because of your necessities, jobs, etc. But still, what is at the back of the mind of the people? What is the behavior of the people behind all these kinds of action? That is really more important. I think these three presentations has brought in that aspects of the behavior of the human beings. Despite that, people are living alone. Despite that, people are not able to take care of the children, to their parents. Despite that, you are not able to do the regular work, but you are able to do volunteering work. All these indicate that the larger changes happening in the society, and also what is the possible way out of these problems of demographic changes. Thank you so much for illuminating all of us. And K.S. James, the Director and Senior Professor at the International Institute for Population Sciences, Mumbai. Thank you all for your participation. It has been really wonderful. And maybe my moderator too also can introduce, but I think we didn't introduce in the beginning, maybe can introduce and stop the session. Thank you. That is from my side.
May I just
you.
add, Professor James, I used to be a student of IIPS before in the late 1960s. So very glad to see you there.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Although not possible physically, but we are
Yes,
able to meet virtually.
thank you.
Thank you. The session is closed.
Thank you very much.